Hello and welcome to Making Change. This is a presentation of Creating the Future, where our mission is to make sure that the questions that bring out the best in all of us are embedded into the day-to-day work of individuals and organizations and communities. I am Hildy Gottlieb. I'm the Chief Mission Officer at Creating the Future, and it is my pleasure to host this broadcast, which was a podcast. I'm so used to saying this podcast, where we talk with leaders from around the world about what it is, the factors that actually create change. I am thrilled to have as my guest today Joe Iarocci from the Cairnway Center for Servant the Servant Leadership Excellence. It's a mouthful, Joe. Welcome to you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks so much, Hildy.
Oh, it's great to have you. Could you share a little bit before we dive into stuff? Could you just share a little bit about the winding path of your journey? What has led you to co-found Cairnway with my friend Kevin Monroe?
Sure. Well, people ask me about my career path, and it really only makes sense if it does it all looking back on it. I grew up in a small New England town, Massachusetts, went to college, went to law school right from college. Not sure why I did that. Seemed like a good idea at the time. I was a Wall Street corporate lawyer in the 1980s, which was a roaring time to be a Wall Street corporate lawyer. As my life wound on, I started to wonder if this was all there was, being a Wall Street corporate lawyer, and that led me to a few other places, including theology school at Emory, and then to work for CARE, one of the world's largest poverty-fighting NGOs, and I worked there as general counsel and then in some other senior positions. At CARE, I came to see that ending world poverty was not a function of more money or more food or more technology or more donations or more government intervention. I came to see that ending world poverty, or indeed the solution to any great world problem, was better leadership. So I became very, very interested there in leadership and leadership development, and that has led me to my current job at Cairnway, where we consult with servant leaders and help them build thriving cultures of servant leadership. So only to the extent it makes any sense, it makes a little sense looking back on it. Most of the time, honestly, I was not sure what I was doing.
Oh, I think that's often the case with many of us. Many of us. You know, I was asked a long time ago to write a piece about finding my calling, and what I wound up writing about is that frequently we don't find our calling finds us.
Indeed.
So yeah. To anyone watching, if you would like to participate, if you would like to ask questions, share your ideas, please tweet to the hashtag CTFuture, and I will be keeping an eye on that as well. I love your story. I love the leap from care over to leadership, and I guess I have a smidge of an idea of what your answer might be. But when you see change happening in the world, what are the factors that you see undergirding that change? What causes change? And I don't know why I think you know the answer.
You know what I'm going to say to that.
Bring it on.
Leadership, of course, but I'd say more particularly, I would say servant leadership, the kind of leadership that I'm so passionate about.
Well, you're going to have to define that. Tell us what it means.
Sure. Servant leadership it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of life. It's a philosophy of leadership. So by philosophy, I mean it's something broader than a leadership model or the current leadership program of the day. It's a way of doing. It's a way of being. It applies in the workplace as well as in the home and in the place of worship and in everywhere. Servant leadership comes out of what makes it really quite a distinctive philosophy. It comes out of a very deep desire to serve first and foremost. It comes out of that part of our brain that maybe doesn't even have language. It comes out of that. But what follows from the deep desire to serve is a conscious choice to lead. So going beyond just the acts of service, but stepping up and leading. So that's the heart of it. There are some distinctive beliefs of servant leaders. One is that the well-being of followers is paramount. The well-being of followers is paramount. It's about understanding and serving the needs of the followers. It's about the growth and development of the followers. And it's really a wonderful thing, it's about the success of those who follow. So imagine a world where everyone's success, I know you could imagine it, Hildy, but not everybody could. Imagine a world where everybody's success is measured by the success of those who they are serving. It is unique and distinctive, servant leadership is, because it defines stakeholders very broadly. It's not about me. It's not about my team. It's not about my department. It's not about my division. It's not about my company. It's not about my country. It's about the world at large, and servant leaders take that large perspective. It's distinctly moral. It's about enriching everything that we touch. And thirdly, I'd say the third distinctive set of beliefs of servant leaders is the right use of power. The right use of power. So traditional leadership is kind of about the hoarding of power and the accumulation of power and the wielding of power and all the trappings of power. But servant leadership is about the right use of power, the sharing of power, the empowerment of others, and
So tell me a little bit, Joe, about what that looks like. I love what you're saying. Obviously, it fits so much with the philosophies and values of creating the future. But what does that look like in a normal day-to-day of somebody going to work?
So, I look you in the eye, Ms. Gottlieb, and I say, "How are you this morning?" And you. Whoops. I ask you, how are you this morning? And I mean it.
Take your time. Take your time. Turn it off.
Sorry.
We've all done it.
It's coming through my phone.
You got it.
I ask you how you're doing, and I mean it. I ask you questions about your weekend. I want to know you as a person. I want to understand you not just as a worker or a human resource, but as a person. And if I happen to be your manager in the hierarchy, I end my conversation with you by asking, how can I help you? So I sit across from you at the table. I know where you want to go in your career. I care about helping you get there in your career. So I try. I deeply care about you, and I trust my behaviors will show you that. And it makes the workplace quite a bit different than traditional workplace.
Now, I can see that being hugely powerful in a workplace. And we've had many discussions at our board level about how can we be stewards, in essence, of the bringing out the best in our employees and being in partnership relationships with people rather than that transactional top-down relationship. And I get that on that level. Although I'm guessing that there's many people watching that will say, wow, that would be great if I worked someplace like that. One of the things that occurs to me, though, is how does that sort of writ large? You mentioned that that was something that came to you when you were working for CARE. What does that look like on a global stage?
Well, what servant leadership can operate on a one-to-one level, like we were just talking about. Organizations can be servant leader organizations, and so they act in the same way, bringing out the best in people, enriching the world. So an organization, an organization like CARE is about the growth and development of people and the betterment of the world. So it can repeat itself at all different levels. You can find institutions and organizations be servant leader organizations having the same positive change.
Okay, what do you say to community organizations that say, well, that's what all of the community benefit nonprofit sector is about. We're all about change through service. And so therefore we are all servant leaders. Are they?
Well, your experience, if it's the same as mine, might suggest that just because your mission statement points you in the direction of service and positive community change doesn't necessarily mean you are behaving that way or having the impact. And I would say that what can be surprising to some people is to think that a business, a for-profit business, can also be a servant leader company and bring positive change to communities and to the world. So it's in the walk, not the talk.
So is that primarily social enterprises, or are you talking about businesses in general?
I think my own view is that any organization, just about any organization. I was once asked in a program whether a drug cartel could be a servant leader organization. I have to say I did not suggest that it could be, but I would suggest that most any organization, for-profit, social enterprise, nonprofit, governmental, can act as a servant leader organization and bring those benefits.
So have you seen that? Have you seen businesses that act as servant leaders in their communities? And could you give us an example?
I'll give an example. It's a poster company. Southwest Airlines was founded on the premise of servant leadership, the growth and development of its own employees, and they think of themselves not as a low-cost carrier, but somebody that's helping others to get home to family and have richer lives because they can travel when they otherwise wouldn't. So an airplane is late, and the weather is deterring it, and the regular Southwest flyers come to understand that a couple of the passengers have to make tight connections. So they organize themselves. You know how they wait in line at Southwest Airlines? They organize themselves, the passengers, to allow those with the tight connections to get on the plane first and have the best seats getting out. And that's, to me, an example how the culture of Southwest Airlines ripples out from the to those passengers who are who emulate it in their interactions with each other. I mean,
now is that guided by? So does the flight attendant stand there and say, before we board, is there anyone with tight connections? How does that work? How would they even know?
They asked that, they figured it out, but the passengers themselves, as I know the story, were not directed to or couldn't be forced to change their priority, but they did it voluntarily. So, sir, you know this servant leadership. It ripples out and has a almost magical effect on those within the ripples.
You know, we know that people will rise to our expectations of them. We
Indeed.
see that, in psychological studies, you see that in schools where kids will, if you separate them out and you tell one group they're gifted and you treat them like that, and you tell the other group that they're the dumb kids, that people will rise to the level of their expectation. We find it again and again. It really is, I think, it sounds like that's what servant leadership is all about.
It's about unlocking and unleashing what I think is our true selves. It's our true self. My own experience in this is that people have to learn to be crappy leaders. People tend to learn to be jerks. They're not naturally that way. The cultures in which they are, formed to make them that way. And we often find people have that aha moment. You mean I don't have to be a jerk? I don't have to be a command and control guy? I can be my real self.
Wow.
And they feel very empowered by that.
Yeah, it's one of the Pollyanna principles that people frequently point to is that individuals will go where systems lead them.
Absolutely.
So then which begs the question: what does one do? How do you embed systems? What are some things people can do that embed systems that actually do bring out the best and the servant part of leadership?
Right. Well, everything communicates. Everything communicates. The smallest things communicate. oftentimes more than the biggest things. So, of course, your performance appraisal system, if it's one based on competition and fear, is different than if it's based on collaboration and group success. If you have reserved parking spaces in your parking lot, why for the executive staff, that tells people something than if you don't. Right? Where you sit in a room with someone when you're talking to them, all these things are formative. So the big processes like hiring and performance appraisal down to the little things about, the size of people's offices communicate. So I think they're all formative. I think about it as formation.
So where does one start? I mean, my brain's going to about 6 different places now, so that's a good thing. You've definitely
only 6? That's surprising. Usually it's more.
I try and keep it under control when I'm.
Hello.
Are you there?
I've lost you just for a second.
Are we back?
I hear you.
Okay, then we are back. Welcome to the interwebs. Yeah. When organizations, specifically those organizations that are looking to create change in communities, whether they are social enterprises, whether they are socially conscious businesses, we hear nowadays of B Corps and such, where or the traditional quote-unquote nonprofit community benefit orgs, what does that actually look like in their programs? I mean, in the very, very day-to-day, I'm about to form a program. Where do I begin if I want to form that program and have it undergirded by servant leadership? What does that look like? I mean, I'm convinced of the results. You don't have to go far to convince me, but knowing that programs that bring out the best in others, that makes logical sense. But if I'm about to start any kind of program, whether I'm a bike shop or a food bank, where do I start? What are some of the questions that I'm asking to start with, and what are the path that I'm putting down, that I'm laying down in front of me?
Well, I believe one should always start with why. Why am I doing this? And answer that question. I'm doing this because I believe. I'm doing this because I believe something. To be very, very clear about that, have it express, and the behaviors and everything flows from that. I think if one's a little bit unclear or not expressed clearly what one believes, things get unclear and muddy. So in servant leadership, that's where always the start. What is the belief behind it, behind the behaviors? Secondly, servant leadership is very results-oriented, impact and results-oriented. That's the measure of it. It's not the intent. Not everybody would think that servant leadership is highly result-oriented, but it is. It also is highly values reflection and assessment, whether it's individual, detach and reflect on oneself, or whether it's corporately on the program. So those are things that would make it look more like a servant leader program. And then finally, again, what's the result on those being served? Are they healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, and more likely themselves to be servant? That's Robert K. Greenleaf's words.
And I know that you were with the Greenleaf Center for quite a while.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance in your career to see longitudinally what happens when I'm almost seeing it as an intervention potentially, where a group had been doing things one way and starts to focus on those 4 wonderful questions that you just asked, and that things change. Have you had the chance longitudinally to see the shift, not just internally, but how that plays out in the community?
Well, my work at CARE, I was 13 years at CARE, and CARE's mission is inherently a servant leader mission. It's about the growth and development of people, especially the half the world living on $2 a day or less. The guiding principles of CARE are servant leader principles, and one sees the communities that CARE has served around the world, where people own their futures, are empowered, and it's not about us coming in and telling people what to do, or us coming in and dropping some solutions or some money on people. I saw the success of that over time. It's a slow process, and it's a process where progress can also go be stopped and go backwards. So it's a journey. Hilda, you know that it's a journey.
Yeah.
The journey.
And it's so interesting that it is a journey where you're constantly having, in part, the same conversation with different people over and over and over again. I mean, I'm envisioning some of the work that you did, as you're talking about at CARE, that when, and especially in an organization like CARE, where there's so many global actors that are sort of imposed on the work of an organization. At any point, any government leader or government official at a local level, those positions change, and you're having to start all over again. But it also sounds like that's a real opportunity to share a different way of being.
Right. I mean, you said it. I couldn't say it better.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've been talking recently around here about, and this is really resonating for me as you're talking, that especially with community benefit organizations, we look at a mission that you're there to accomplish. Businesses tend to see as their mission. I don't think it's necessarily true. I think they're short-sighting themselves. But businesses seem to see, our job is to sell X, is to provide X. But you see a larger mission with community benefit organizations. The thing that I love about what you're talking about is it is really walking the talk of accomplishing the mission while you're on your way to accomplishing the mission.
Yeah, perfectly said. Perfectly said.
And that's really inspiring for people in their day-to-day.
I will inspire also those who might be listening who are in the for-profit sector. So, and I will defend. I want to say a word of defense, not defense. Maybe that's too strong. There are organizations that I can tick names off, like Southwest Airlines or the Container Store or TD Industries down in Dallas, where their mission is to make the world a better place for the people they serve and sell to, the people that work for them, the people that enjoy their products. And there are countless other for-profit businesses that is their true why. Profit comes as a consequence, but not a goal to those companies. And in fact, it's sort of a secret sauce that it comes. And so it's not just the so-called social sector or public sector or nonprofit sector where servant leadership is practiced and has effect. It can be anywhere. Maybe not the drug cartel. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll tell you, that was one of the more interesting questions I've been asked.
and it really is true. It is the it has been a belief of mine, and I have been watching it, to notice the extent to which those organizations, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, because you see a lot of this in the non-profit world as well, to notice those whose goal appears to be money versus those whose goal to be, and sometimes in both worlds, for-profit and non-profit, it comes from a place of scarcity rather than a place of intent. So talk a little bit about that. When you enter into a situation where people are so deeply in scarcity that all they're thinking about is their next fundraising goal, we'll talk about the mission, but that's so that, how many times do we hear people say, we will talk about the mission so we can raise money? And in the for-profit world, we frequently hear about people talking about doing good so they can do well, which in my mind is
no.
so what do you say to people like that?
Well, there's a lot going on in that question. There's a lot going on in that question. I think. Ask it again. Ask it again.
The folks that are so stuck in scarcity that they say,
Right.
yeah, we really can't do that yet because we've got to, we got to make some money here. We got to bring in some dollars. We got to make payroll. That's all very nice, but we've got to make payroll.
Okay. I'm back with you. Okay. So I'm sure you appreciate that. I think inherent in servant leadership, and certainly inherent in the way I look at it, I know the way that Creating the Future does, is to start from an aspiration rather than a problem. It's sort of the starting point. If one starts from, I'm in a position of scarcity, I'm in a position of problem, and how do I solve that? That leads one to a different set of questions and a different set of possible paths. If one is able to set that aside for a moment and say not what the problem is, but what is the future? What is the potential here? What is and how do I get there? It raises a different set of questions, and so I think I do think that servant leadership is inherently connected to the latter view, because servant leadership is inherently interested in the future and foreseeing the future. So. It's very, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. It's the hierarchy of needs situation, but one has to be able to detach from that, that present and do that. As you say, there's a lot of wealth, and I mean that very broadly defined, locked up in people and organizations that it just needs to be unlocked. Does that sound too naive? I don't know. Maybe that sounds too naive. It's, look, Hildy, the solutions. The figuring out the question's the hard part. That's for sure. But in any group of committed people, the wisdom is there, the knowledge is there, the experience is there. The challenge for people in your business and my business is to kind of create the environment where it can be unlocked, or it can be catalyzed, or people can, see things that they maybe didn't see. As they say, a fish never discovered water. So that's what we try to do. I mean, like I was saying back from my time at CARE, the world does not have to have that extreme poverty. There is plenty in the world. There's no reason for it. In fact, it's a scandal that it exists. So the solutions are there. It's just a question of leadership and unlocking it.
That's really.
Sorry, I'm getting carried away here. Stop me if I'm.
No. It's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. That's the good stuff. I am loving the emphasis on creating an environment that brings out the best in people. And that's really what you're talking about. It's so interesting to me that when people give that example of, well, we got to make payroll. This is all very nice, but we got to make payroll. It is easy to help make the connection for them that bringing out the best in, let's say, their employees, bringing out the best in the people that they are there to work with externally, whether that is customers or folks in community, that bringing out the best in those folks is good for their financial bottom line. I mean, to me, there's just a no-brainer connection there. That while the financial bottom line, and I love the way you said it, it's a byproduct.
Right.
Money is always a means. Money is never an ends. You can't eat it. You can't be sheltered with it. You can't. Money is always a means. It's never an end. And so that whole creating that environment where you're making the leap and saying, if you're bringing out the best in your employees, that has to help bring out the financial best as well in everyone around. Where's that link? Show where you found that link before. I would love to. I would love to hear if you found stories of that.
So, on behalf of all those on the servant leadership journey, I have folks on the servant leadership journey do not believe in servant leadership and act as servant leaders in order to make money. I mean, many people do, many people don't. But that's never the minute that becomes the primary, not anything other than a byproduct, right? As you say, then that's not a very a good servant leadership. Now, so picture a struggling nonprofit organization. It's got 10 people, or a community-based organization, social. It's got 10 people. The executive director says, "My word, if we only had one more person, we could really do more, get those grant proposals out, or whatever it is." If the executive director of that struggling 10-person nonprofit is a jerk or a tyrant or a command and control person or not anything but a servant leader, the 10 people that work there will go and work, all inspired by the mission, of course, but they'll go and they'll give that effort which they have, that they have to. Sorry. If that executive director is well along the servant leader journey, that executive director will bring out 10%, 20%, 30% more discretionary effort. Discretionary effort. I don't have to work this weekend, Hildy, but you know what? I love you, and you need me, and I would do anything for you, and I'm going to work this weekend, Hildy. Well, that's like having 2 or 3 more people. I mean, it's not 2 or 3 more, cash, but that's a lot of energy and value and benefit that comes from people that work with their blood and their sweat and their tears, and not for their paycheck. So the logic is, I hope is pretty clear. And to the extent there have been empirical studies of this, there are some that it bears it out. Does that make any sense?
I love that term. If somebody is out there and wants to tweet the term discretionary effort, we're so used to hearing about discretionary income. I've been thinking so much these days about that whole thing that we don't want money, we want what money buys us. And that whole thought of discretionary effort is beautiful.
And what's so nice about servant leadership, I mean, in terms of the issue we're talking about, which is productivity and things like that, it not only does it bring out the discretionary effort that all of us can give. Hildy, I want to work this weekend because I love you and I care for you and you need me. But if you've been a good servant leader to me and you've been growing me, and maybe for the last 2 years I may be twice as productive and as I was 2 years ago, and so it's a multiplier, not just the discretionary effort, but the growth. So that's why the great high-performing organizations, that's where they're getting their value, from the growth and the discretionary effort.
And just as a negative environment ripples out, and if one person's negative, that's real contagious. The positive is as well. We frequently talk at Creating the Future about, we call it leading from the middle. And people who say, I don't have any authority, and I love the fact that no matter how high you get, people say, I don't have the ultimate authority. And, I often joke that if you finally got up to see God, God would say, yeah, you know what, I can't make that decision. And what we found is this really sounds like a wonderful way that one could really lead from the middle, that you don't have to be the boss.
Absolutely. Oh, my word. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Absolutely, positively, 100%. Servant leadership has nothing to do with the organizational chart. Nothing. It doesn't matter whether you manage 1 person or 1,000 people. It's about influence, not authority. One can have a lot of influence in the middle. People, a group of committed people in the middle can have amazing influence on an organization. It's absolutely a separate beast than the hierarchy and the authority of an org chart. Now, when the two are combined, it's quite powerful. But absolutely, the folks that are in the middle, so to speak, each and every one can be a tremendous servant leader.
It's really
tremendous influence.
Yeah, yeah. And what's occurring to me as you're talking is the number of people who feel through life pretty much, I don't have any power. And
Yeah,
whether that's at work, whether that is at home, whether that is in their neighborhood, we've got some pretty disempowering systems at play right
that's
now,
true.
where people can feel disempowered and feel, well, it's all very well and good, but I can't get my boss to do servant leadership. What you're talking about is the power of an individual to be a servant leader in their own life, and that they don't have to wait for somebody.
It's interesting you should say that. We've had that. That's a comment, a type of comment that we hear quite a lot, and it's one of the revelations that people have when they talk about this. I can be the change I want to see in the world, right? I can be the change I want to see in the world. How do I get servant leadership in my department or my company or my nonprofit, whatever it is? First step is you be it yourself, and I can only we take this on faith, but it does have a virtuous cycle, a rippling, transformative effect on those around one that believes and acts as a servant leader. So you're absolutely right. We live in a world where we're very disempowering for certain people and groups of people. But on the other hand, I have to some degree the ability to admit defeat or decide that I don't have power when in fact maybe I have more than I think. So
Wow, that's
hierarchical leaders want you to think you don't have any power. I mean, the ones that are really that oftentimes it's easy to describe servant leadership as what it's not, and those that hoard power, those that hoard knowledge, those that are command and control and not transparent, and we've all had that,
So how does that fit into a world that rewards us for how we sort of self-attribute? We have to go out and, I mean, there's all of these efforts to self-branding, individual personal branding. Where does a serving others and a living to serve others, where does that fit into a world that is so about, hey, look at me, no, now look at me, no, what do you think of me?
Well, I don't know. That's a rhetorical question a little bit. I can only when servant leaders in your life, I know servant leaders in my life. They tend to be humble. They tend to want to put others into the spotlight, and they eschew the spotlight. They tend to want to lead from behind. That's kind of comes with the territory. So those who are doing all these branding exercises that you're describing, probably are not walking the servant leader talk, but I wouldn't know for sure. There are times, right, when someone, either a person or organization, has to take the spotlight or has to give orders. There's times when command is appropriate. So it's not that you're a milquetoast, but that I'd say is inconsistent with it, because it's, again, the success of a servant leader is only measured by the success of those served.
Yeah, it's interesting how many of us can name organizations and or businesses that, yeah, they've got a solid brand and everybody knows who they are, very well loved, but who are immensely generous, who see themselves as part of something bigger, rather than as you so aptly put it, the command and control part. I speak with, and I'm sure you speak with, so many organizations of all kinds, for-profit, non-profit, government. The real truth is none of us can do it all on our own. And while, yeah, Pepsi's job is to vanquish Coke, having a range of products in the marketplace actually benefits everybody. So it's really interesting to see, who do we venerate, who do we think of warmly, versus, yeah, I buy their product because it's cheapest, or but I really don't like them.
Well, first of all, Hildy, I have to say I'm sitting here in Atlanta, Georgia, so we don't think too highly of Pepsi, and we would, I'm sorry, but I've got to just make that clear in case any of my Atlanta friends are watching.
Well, if it makes
Um,
any difference, I'm a Coke drinker and always have been,
all
and I've
right,
never
good,
liked
good.
Pepsi. So
Uh,
now the Pepsi people will hate me.
no, no. Consumers, I think especially, and I'd like to know your thoughts on this. The younger generation are very socially conscious and adept in their consuming habits, both their lifestyle, sustainability, health. We're seeing all the healthy food movements and the anti-sweatshop movements, all these things, and I think that uh, more and more we can feel the public at large speaking about these things in the way they consume and the companies that they patronize. And those people buy from some companies because the company believes what they do in a sustainable world, or no sweatshops, or healthy food, or promoting small farmers and things like this. So now what do you think? Don't you feel some of that now? I think it's kind of exciting.
It's very exciting, and I'm loving the fact that you're bringing up the thought of the current generation, the millennial generation. Do you see them grabbing on to servant leadership and to leading in this way, even if you don't call it servant leadership? Because leading as a servant has been around forever. There's quotes for thousands of years from
That's
Lao
right.
Tzu.
Exactly.
Do you see this resonating more deeply? Do you see younger people called to service in a way we haven't seen in a while? Because that's what I'm seeing.
I see the same thing. I see the exact same thing. I've got three daughters, 25, 23, and 19, so I've got at least some connection to that. Uh, Absolutely. This whole social enterprise movement, the idea that I'm not going to go work for that big Fortune 100 company, maybe I'll work for a social enterprise, is, I think, being fueled by this generation. Uh, the interest in nonprofit as a career is higher than ever. I was just over at Emory University doing a program yesterday. The desire for classes about development and things like that is higher than ever. Uh, my own sense is you excluded from this. I'll include myself. We should just get out of the way and let this generation be itself, because I think it's going to make some great changes and maybe clean up some of the messes that we've made.
Well, in part, getting out of the way is probably a big part of service. Yeah. One of the things that I'm noticing and I feel real old saying in this generation, this younger generation, these kids these days.
But kids these days.
But the reality, what I'm seeing is that they are seeing life in a far more integrated way and a less binary way. There's not as much either or. And
Yes.
and in previous generations, you were either doing good for the world or you were running a business. And businesses that did well in the world had to make a choice. And you're making me think about that.
Yes. Oh, you're making me, you're spurring me to think of something also, a similar thing. I think I'd be curious. This generation also seems to see an integration between life and work, and it's why? Because of this thing right here, right? My phone that went off earlier, in large part technology, so that there was this distinction for my dad between he worked and then he came home when he wasn't working. He worked to live. Now I think people live to work. It's integrated. It's not about work-life balance. That concept's out the door. I think it's work-life integration. And so increasingly people want meaning, they want joy, they want prosperity, and they're going to get it at work. So what do you think? Do you think there's something to that?
I think there's something to it, and I think it's cross-generational. I think if we really apply that now outward, that it's very easy to say, for someone like me or you, for whom their work is love and life. But I don't have to work at McDonald's and then go clean somebody's house to make a living to feed my family. And what I'm starting to sense from what you're talking about is, again, that this is about the way we be with each other. This is not creating a significant change in the world because you stake a flag and you say, I am making a change. This is changing the world for the person who works at McDonald's and for me as an employer if someone is cleaning my house, and how we be with each other. That's huge.
I agree with that. I agree with that perfectly. So when I began by saying servant leadership is a philosophy of life as well as leadership, if one is on the servant leader journey, the way you treat the person serving you at the takeout window is the same as the same level of respect at which you treat the President of the United States. I mean, and the way you decide what wage to pay the person that's cleaning your house is the same way you decide what bonus you're going to give to the stockbroker. So that's why it's such a wonderful philosophy of life and leadership.
Well, I can think of no better way to end our conversation than on that great summation. I am so thrilled to have been able to talk with you about this. I'm just going to be jazzed for the entire rest of the day.
I am too.
I am looking forward to folks commenting. Once this is posted, folks can comment in the blog stream. And Joe, this has just been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry my phone went off, and
you're only human.
I was going to put a product placement in for Coca-Cola, but I won't do that.
Well,
Hometown company.
Thank you so much, Joe.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.